Hello and welcome to Held in Our Hearts Baby Loss Podcast. We are an Edinburgh-based charity providing baby loss counselling and support for bereaved families. We are committed to ensuring that no family has to face their journey of loss alone, and we wanted to create this podcast to reach out and share stories, encouraging greater connection and understanding. Join us on our journey as we speak to a wide variety of guest speakers who have been personally affected by baby loss or who have been moved by it. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of our podcast. My name's Angie and today I had the opportunity to speak with Nicola Welsh. Nicola is the Chief Executive Officer of Held in Her Heart and is herself a bereaved mum, having lost her precious son Theo. She was previously a behavioural support teacher before she became involved with the charity as a volunteer, befriending and also doing befriending training. We had a meaningful and heartfelt conversation about Nicola's story, her loss, and what led her to Held in Her Hearts. Together we discussed the challenges she faced learning through pregnancy that her son had a condition called exomphalis and coping with the anxiety and uncertainty that brought. We spoke about her son's birth and then the difficult days and weeks that followed with her son in intensive care, and then the heartbreaking day that she had to say her final goodbye to him. We then talked about what life looked like after Theo had died, and the lack of bereavement care support when she went home, and Nicola's desire for that basic human connection, something that still drives her today, desperate to speak to someone else who was also bereaved, someone that understood, something that I'm sure many of our listeners will relate to. We also covered Baby Loss Awareness Week, which supports families and aims to encourage greater understanding of what is still sadly a sensitive and often taboo subject. As always, if you or anyone you know has been affected by baby loss, please reach out to us at heldinourhearts.org.uk or email us at info@heldinourhearts.org.uk. And now, let me introduce the inspiring Nicola Welsh. So, welcome Nicola. We're delighted to have you here today. This isn't quite our usual work setting, is it? It feels a little bit strange.
I know, I'm excited though. Our first podcast, that's really great, and great to launch it on baby loss awareness, the day of, that we start talking a bit more about that in society. So great opportunity.
We're so pleased that you're able to chat to us today. So firstly, can you tell us a little bit about where your journey began?
Yeah, so I suppose I have to go all the way back to my own son. It's why I'm here. It's why I do what I do. So, in 2008, I was pregnant with my second baby, and like many, went for the scan. But at the scan, they identified that something was wrong with the baby's tummy. That was how it was introduced. They said their actual words were, "I can see the baby and I can see its tummy, but it's not what I'd want to see." And I think everybody has that moment which changes their journey, their path. For some families, there's no heartbeat, or however the news comes, it alters your path. And for mine, that was it. It went from a healthy pregnancy into you need to go up the stairs now, and you then go in the different route. You come out, and you didn't go in the happy pregnant woman. You come out a worried, anxious woman, I suppose. We went to the Royal Infirmary, which is our local hospital, the next morning, thankfully straight away. So, there was no lingering about too much. And they identified then that my son, didn't know he was a boy at the time, but my baby had an exomphalis, which is a 1 in 5,000 condition where the tummy muscles don't close fully around the umbilical cord. And so what grows into that space is anything from stomach, liver, or kidney. And sadly, he had all of those in his exomphalis bubble, really. So on the screen, it actually looked like that. It looked like a little bubble on his tummy. And then, it was an anxious pregnancy. Like many families that say that, like another pregnancy, it's never the same. And I think for me, that pregnancy changed that course, because I could never be the bubbly pregnant woman. I was always carrying a worry about my son, always. They just gave us loads of hope, I suppose, at the time. Did I think that he would die? No, I had a fleeting thought once, I remember, because the neighbour next door was pregnant and due just not long after me. And I remember one day thinking how awful that would be. Imagine her hanging out baby clothes and I didn't have my baby. But that was it. I quickly shut it down. I think anybody does. You can't look at that. Your psyche won't allow you. It's at that point his heart's beating and my heart's beating, and that's all I can focus on.
Just a self protection, really, isn't it? To protect you and to protect your baby.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's primal, isn't it? I often talk about that, but it's primal to protect your young. It goes to animals, to humans. I don't think there's many other more primal instincts in us than that, which is why it's utterly devastating when that doesn't go right, and you feel like you've done something to not be able to protect that young, that baby. And then I I felt what I thought was contractions. I was only 31 weeks. I'd had a curry. My mum and dad had been up and I was decorating my house. And they were saying, I think you've been painting too much. I think you've been doing too much today. But my first son had came early, 6 weeks early, and I recognised it.
And had they said that that would be a possibility that he might come early? Did they advise that that might be the case?
No, they didn't actually. Do you know, in hindsight, I always think it was because his exomphallus was so big. So on when he did arrive, he had a very, very large exomphallus. You could see that on the screen, but you would never know until the baby's here, and they told us that. And I think looking back, I feel like he was maybe my body was triggered because it felt like he was full term, but also in another way, I think he knew he needed to come then. So what eventually evolved in the story was that his exomphallus was sadly trying to close around his organs, and um, I think somebody maybe mentioned that to us, but I suppose there's no medical definiteness about would he have been a stillborn baby, would he have died in utero. I'm not sure. I've never properly asked that, but I will always interpret it that he needed to meet us, like he needed to meet us and be loved, and for me to be able to hold him. And in some ways, that's how I think we all interpret our own stories. But um, so yeah, we went and we had a natural labour, which was something really unique at the time. For example, babies were often sectioned, and again, I'm really grateful for the team for allowing me to have that. We had music and I was terrified, don't get me wrong, I was utterly terrified, but the music I played, it was on repeat because I didn't know that I was going to have him. And so we had to go to the car and find a CD. It was like, do you know, it's like some opera piece. And actually, the funny thing is, the origins of it is to do, it's called the Lament of My Son. And it's a mum grieving a son. It's the oddest thing because I never knew the story of it. And actually, we played it at his funeral in the end. It was always connected. And I hear that now. It's very much him, but it was, there was a relaxedness, and there was not many people in the room. It was very unmedical, I guess, in what I'm thinking, and that's nice to remember that he arrived.
It's nice to know that you could have it as you wanted it as well, with music, beautiful music, maybe on a repeat, but things that you wanted it in the place at the time.
Yeah, it felt like maybe some control, and maybe not. I suppose not traumatic. It wasn't traumatic and taken out of my hands really. So I got to see him when he was born, just briefly, as in I remember looking down and being scared. I think I don't remember looking at everything. I just looked at his wee face, and he was just, oh, he's so cute, so cute. He had sort of really blonde hair, and none of my babies are
Blonde
like
hair, that would have been a
that.
surprise.
Yeah, quite fair and kind of curly. I had a little curl in the end. I really remember thinking, and I don't know over the years if I've really built that up. It's a funny thing, but he was taken quickly away. He had just a really petite little perfect face. That's what I totally remember. Um, and they had to stabilise him, and my husband got to go with him. And he had to go then to the sick kids, so he had to be quite quickly taken. His exomphallus had ruptured during the birth, so nothing dramatic, I don't believe, but he needed to be operated on. And as fate would have it, it was actually the surgeon that we'd met before who was on call that night. So um, I loved that it was like the person that knew him best, got to meet him early on and knew all about us and knew me and my husband. And and so yeah, he had his first operation when he was just hours old, really.
That must have been, I can't begin to imagine how difficult that must have been for you to have him taken away to have that operation, and then you're left presumably on the postnatal ward without your baby.
Yeah. Oh, it was awful because actually I had to go to theatre. So in that, like, unfortunate episode next was I couldn't deliver my placenta. And so Gary had a choice. Well, he didn't have a choice because I didn't give him a choice. And so he had to follow the ambulance with Theo. And I made him, and he's like, "I can't leave you. You're going to theatre." And I was like, "No, you absolutely can't leave me." I was on my own, and because late at night, and it's Saturday night, I remember because we were watching some, like, I think it was like X Factor on the telly at one point, because I kind of played in the background, and then, but you know what I do remember about that was I went down to theatre, and it's all these moments, and anyone bereaved listening to this will totally get this. You remember all the things, like from small to big to smells to sounds, and as because it was really late going to theatre, it was quite relaxed because I think there wasn't many people around, and the theatre had music playing. And the guy who was looking, I don't even know what his name is, but he was like, he wasn't the anaesthetist, he was looking after the room almost, and he was singing and had this music. And there was a lady, again, I don't know her name, but she had a camera that well, my husband's camera, and she'd taken pictures and she just played them on a loop round to me, showing me my son, which, I mean, so I detracted myself because obviously I was aware that this man had a glove up to his armpit, and it's like I did actually say to him at the time, like, "Are you going to pull out a cuddly toy or something?" Because it was just one of those surreal moments in your life that you're like, "Oh my goodness, like, what has just happened?" And I think you're trying to lighten it, and I think you're trying to kind of soothe yourself almost. And then there was this lady who'd never met before, showing me these pictures. And again, after I came round from theatre, I was a bit sedated for it, but when I came round, I was really shaking. Like, I think that happens. Like, I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't hold my tea. And she was sitting next to me and just giving me comfort. And gosh, you're so grateful for those people, aren't you?
I think we hear that a lot, don't we, from families that we support. It's the smallest things, someone holding your hand, someone making you a cup of tea, that families really, really hold on to in those moments.
Oh, totally. It's like human empathy, and like that, stripping everything away and just saying, whether I understand or not, I'm giving you everything of me, because if it was me in your shoes, I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? Pure empathy is giving a part of yourself and saying, I'm here. And like, yeah, oh my goodness, I can't ever put into words all those people that were with me and helped. Um, and then I didn't get to meet him. My husband came back and said that he'd seen him and he was stable, and they were just trying to control his temperature, and it was really critical, obviously. But the next day I did. Next day I met him. That was terrifying because everybody was around his bed. In my head, I think there was about 12 people. I'm not sure if I'm any count, but there was, and I just broke down. I had his blanket and just stood, like, I wasn't allowed in the room at the time, but just stood watching him, and with my blanket and my pajamas, because like, nobody told me to put clothes on, so I somehow put my pajamas on to go from like one hospital to the next. And I remember this lovely nurse coming across and saying, "Oh, you see his mum? Oh, he's perfect. Oh my God, what a beautiful boy!" And oh, like, don't be worried, I'll tell you who they all are. And she told me all these people that were around his bed, and then I was thinking they were all there for him. Wow, like, all these people are going to make him better. Like, they're all there to support him, and that's reassuring. Um, and then our journey, I guess, started. There's always different sections. There's the before, and then there's the during his life, and then after, I guess. And so this was embarked on the next bit of his journey, I guess.
And what did those weeks look like? Was it just in the
Um,
hospital every day?
yeah, every day, didn't miss a day. Um, Mostly together. I had a 2-year-old at the time. Lucas was just turning 2, so he sometimes came, and it was terrifying because he would just want to press all the buttons. And in intensive care, high dependency, it's like, no, 2-year-old and that do not go together. So I have to say that was pretty stressful. Bless my mum and dad. You could only have limited people. So Gary's family lived up north, so it was my mum and dad that were designated as visitors, and Lucas. So Lucas met him. He brought him a James train because Theo's middle name was James after my dad, which just gives me loads of pride now. My dad's not alive now, and he was devastated when Theo died, and so it's lovely that he has his name, such an honour. So yeah, Lucas, I've got pictures of him giving him this train, um, and there's quite a few pictures with Lucas, and that's really important to me, I think, because he is 13 now. Goodness, terrifying teenager, but he will always have them. And I do remember at the time recognizing that he's part of this. It's not just us. This is his brother, and he's part of this journey. So we would visit every day. Sometimes play music, read to him. We used to read "Guess How Much I Love You," the book which many people know. We used to read it all the time to him.
It's a beautiful book, isn't it?
Oh, it just says everything that you want to say, doesn't it? Gary, I've got pictures of him reading it, just nice stuff, and getting to rub his feet. I couldn't hold him, so he was in an incubator. And at one point, actually, he had 3 operations in his life, but it meant that he had as advanced as we are in medicine, he basically had a washing line across the top of the incubator, holding up this little silo with the contents of his stomach, and a big sign saying "Do not lift," because if you lifted it, you would lift him. I mean, like, you couldn't believe that was as bare as it got. But isn't it amazing? Like, we can advance in technology so much, but sometimes it's just like we need a piece of string, we need it to go across the incubator, and we need to strap it onto something and just put a sign saying "Do not lift." So that was painful, because, oh my gosh, you're just desperate to hold your baby, especially when they're poorly. And I was desperate to feed for him, so I'd sit next to him and try and express, or try going to different rooms. And yeah, that whole time was hard, obviously, like, just, it was full of hope, and then not hope of, not that he was going to die, or I didn't think about that. I know it sounds really strange, like he's in intensive care, and his stomach's outside his body. You would be like, what were you doing? But you don't, because it's all about hope. It's all about keeping him, like, that it's going to be okay. It'll be okay. And actually, sadly, did end up having an operation at the end, which reversed some of, like, the silo that he had around this. And for the first time, then he looked like he had a baby with a wee blanket over him. It was almost the most hopeful period. And actually, then it was just days into that I phoned during the night, as I always did, always phoned every single night about 2 or 3 in the morning when I was up expressing, to see, how's he, how's my boy, and what's he been up to. And the nurse was just like, yeah, he's just, we're just a bit concerned. There's a bit of leaking from his wound, and we would like to have a look at him in the morning. And then that was it. Gary went through. I didn't, because it had been Lucas's second birthday the day before, and I wanted to spend it with him. So, strangely, as a mum, for anybody who's got lots of children, regardless if they're sick or not, you are still pulled. You love them equally, and so Lucas still needed his mum. So I wanted to do art, because he got an art table for his birthday, and I don't know if in hindsight I was just trying not to really focus on maybe what I was feeling. Gary always said he had a really bad feeling that day, and that's why he had to go. So I met him through at the Sick Kids, and then we went up and got taken into that small room that probably many people will recognise in any hospital, the small room with lots of people in it, and lots of chairs, and sad, sad faces, and deep breaths, and that awful feeling of something is going to be said and I don't want to hear it. And yeah, they then said that we have done everything medically we can for your son, and he's going to die. And to hear that when he's alive and he's got a beating heart and he's warm, like, it's 11 years, I still cannot, and don't pretend to find the words to explain to somebody how that feels. It's, yeah, there isn't any words, actually.
Mm-hmm. It's the words that no parent ever wants to hear. The worst nightmare for anyone in that situation. Because, like you said, you had hope all the way through. You didn't let it might have been the prime minister, but you didn't let yourself believe that was a possibility. And then to be told that day.
Yeah, just yeah, it's beyond anyone's comprehension, isn't it? Because medicine should fix everything. I think that's what you believe, and certainly it's what my family believed. It's like hard to tell the grandparents, hard to tell anybody that he was going to die. I had my friend phone me back and say, I don't mean to phone you back, but like, sorry, do you mean he's going to die? Because I think I was just bumbling. There's nothing that they can do. There's nothing else that they can do. I think that was the only words, but it was like something, we're like, but what do you mean by that? Like, there must be, he's in hospital. And then we spent the evening with him, and actually, to be honest, that's now gives me loads of comfort because I got to hold him. So for the first time, I got to hold my baby, and oh, it's just magical. It's like, again, can't describe how special that was. But obviously, with the heaviest hearts, knowing it was going to be very time limited that we had with him.
And so after that day, when you had to go home, you had to say goodbye to him. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult that was. When you went home, was there any support for you?
No, unfortunately, that's where the care in the hospital has been amazing, but it was the coming home part that was really hard. My GP came out to visit me, and a community midwife came out, but of course, it was at the end of that time of the month, and the doctor had said I could go and get a double appointment, and I did try that once, but it just didn't feel right to be sitting in a waiting room with people that were sick, coughing, ill. I wasn't ill; I was grieving. My baby had just died, and I felt really isolated and alone. And I guess then I eventually did see a counsellor through NHS Lothian, which they no longer have, but I did. I kind of was able to articulate eventually that I needed some support, and that really helped. But around about that time, I think what I was really desperate for was to meet somebody else who really understood. So I was given from the hospital some leaflets, but one of them was, well, the only place I could reach out to was the Child Death Helpline at the time. I don't know if they're still around, but it was just a card, and I phoned them, and it was actually a lady who'd lost a baby older than Theo, and I came off the phone and it was just really heartbroken for her, actually. And Gary was like, this isn't going to work if you're going to feel sorry for the person you've just spoken to. I think it was too early. And then I spoke to somebody again, and I do remember that being a bit difficult because she was saying, "Oh, I'm here till this time," and I felt like I was then maybe part of a process almost. It felt like I was fitting into a time schedule, and then I phoned once again, and it was just purely to ask, "Will I ever be happy again?"
A heartbreaking question for anyone. I'm sure lots of people listening will relate to that feeling of whether there is any hope or happiness or being able to laugh or feel joy again. So knowing that there was only a phone line really for support, what did you find yourself doing being isolated at home?
I suppose trying to reach out to, I had amazing support from my family and friends, but again, it's different speaking to somebody. It's not like you can turn to somebody who's lost a parent who they would understand, and so many people have had those experiences of loss. So I just felt really broken. And actually, I did have 2 further miscarriages that year. And so, I really was. I was rock bottom, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. And for those that are listening that maybe haven't experienced and aren't bereaved parents themselves, what is it that is so different about the death of your own, in the wrong order? What is it that makes it so difficult for others to understand and to relate to?
Yeah, I think there's many things that set it apart. So, not that we try and hierarch grief. I don't think that's helpful. But I think what makes it different is the shared memories. So since my son's died, my mum and dad have sadly died, and as devastating as that is, and of course there's grief involved, I have a lifetime of memories with them. I can talk to people about them. I have photographs. People tell me, "Oh, you really like them," or "The way you do that's very much like them," or "I think that's their personality," which of course is just wonderful to hear. I have nobody in my life that can tell me anything about Theo. There's nothing that I can then wait, like it's anchoring it down, isn't it? And saying he was here, he lived, he was my son, because I've got photographs and I have memories in my head. But this is what makes it different. For some families where there's a stillbirth, a baby's born early, then the moments that they have with their baby are all that they have. And and some people might not have even seen them during the pregnancy, and so it's something that can be easily forgotten almost. And I think it's parents, roles to try and I think keep their memory alive, which is very different from others. And of course, you don't grow up ever expecting this to happen. It's not the natural order. Nobody ever speaks about, and what if your child dies? What would you do then? It's something that is not discussed. So when a family have to make these difficult decisions after a baby's died, it's something that they will never have contemplated in their life before. So that's what makes it very different. We will all know growing up that most likely we hope that a family, a parent and grandparents will go before us. It's more of the natural accepted order. So when it does reverse itself, it's incredibly painful because it's the whole future that you're grieving. It's what you wished for them and what they should be doing with you always, I think, until you want your own last breath. It's like they should be here, they should be living life with you. So that's what makes it different, I think.
So in your search, you talked about reaching out to get phone support, but from what you've said, it's really what you felt strongly was that need to physically connect with someone that understood. Did you find people in your local community that were able to help?
Yeah, I did in the end, actually. So she's actually a mum of my eldest son, a friend at school, and I actually now can't think how I came across her. Had she heard about? Were we at? Oh, I know. We were at classes together. We were at, I think, breastfeeding classes together. And yes, I remember her talking about her baby before had died, and I could not begin to contemplate it. That's right. And that I think she reached out to me, and she came round to my house, and I remember being like a nodding dog. Everything she said, I just nodded and nodded and nodded because it was the first time that somebody absolutely understood where I was in my world. And we met many times. I'm very grateful for that support. And I think it's probably why I was passionate about what we do now, because of that shared lived experience that only another bereaved parent could really understand some of the complexities to that type of loss.
So from that amazing connection to be able to speak to someone who can share and understand, how did you go from being in that situation to where you are today? Tell us about that jump. What were you doing before you worked at Held in Our Hearts?
So I was a teacher before, so I specialised in behaviour support, and I was doing that. I'd done that for 20 years, and loved my job, I have to say. Um, so in some ways, I always think it was Oscar, my baby that came after Theo. So some people call it a rainbow baby, but that next baby, obviously difficult pregnancy, anxious, but he arrived, and almost instantaneously, not only did I get so much comfort from him, like as in, like, I mean, he was never Theo, and he could never replace Theo, and he was never to do that. But he brought a baby back in my arms and gave me an awful lot of hope about life again. And I very quickly then turned to, I feel stronger and I want to do something to make sure nobody is on their own. It was really inspired by this place of, okay, I feel more secure now and I'm going to do everything in my power. And it started with a huge big piece of paper, which I still got, a big rolled up sheet of paper about how I was going to do it. And it had who I was going to talk to, who I was going to research, how I was going to do it. I love looking at it sometimes because it's like, wow. I mean, it was huge because it was like a brainstorm, because as a teacher, it's like, okay, my mind map of how I was going to do it. And in that place, I stumbled across, whilst going, who's out there? What are the other charities? Now, it sounds weird to say that, because why did I not do that at the time? But that always sticks in my head, because I think it's for somebody to find things themselves when they're grieving. Grief is foggy, it's heavy, it's complicated. You don't have that clarity. So with the clarity came, I could then research, and I stumbled across what was Sans Lothians at the time, and emailed them saying, I noticed that you have support, I'd really like to hear more about it. And at the same time, I'd just had an agreement from the hospital to meet to set up a working group within St John's local hospital. And it evolved from there. It kind of snowballed. I then became a volunteer. I trained to do befriending, and I was driving to my schools, and then in my lunch hour I'd be sitting like replying to bereaved parents, and I mean, it just became that I was as equally passionate. My other 2 days when I didn't work, I was doing everything to do with the charity, and do you know, it was like this purpose. It was like it made sense. It was like, this is what I need to do. And I was very fortunate that at the end of 2014, the previous chief exec was retiring, and I was approached to see if I would consider taking the charity on, which was pretty terrifying when I'd come from teaching, no management experience. But what I eventually said to family and friends was, better to give it a shot and me fail than to not do it at all. That was my philosophy. I think was right. You believe in the bereavement. You know this inside out. You breathe it. So what can go wrong? If I know that, surely everything else can be built around it.
It's like an internal compass, really, that fire and that drive to from your experience for someone else and every other family not to have that same experience. So how did it feel day one, complete change in career, heading up a charity? What did that first day or first week look like?
So terrifying, absolutely terrifying, no kidding. Drove up to where we are now, same building. And you know, one of my bereaved mums that I'd supported met me there, and she had a card and flowers, which still, again, all these people, you know, when you're just like, oh, she met me there. And that, you know, just made me go, okay. It was a week after my dad's funeral, sadly. So there was more grief around for me, but I was like, right, he knew about this job. He knew I wanted to do it. Sat with a laptop, and to be honest, not much more. We had two counsellors and an office manager and me. That was it. And it was a bit like, how do we do this? But we'll do it. And it's just, I mean, it's, you know, our fundraising manager often talks about it's like, you know, teaspoons of sugar, and until you can get a snowball, and then you can roll the snowball and it gathers momentum. And it's what it's felt like. It was shoveling with a teaspoon for an awful long time, let me tell you. But um, building up relationships and connections, and getting to where we are now.
So can you tell us about today at Held in Hearts? What was your vision for the charity when you came on board?
I think it's the same vision as I have now. It's I'm incredibly passionate that no one has to do it on their own. As a charity, we're looking to make changes so that families don't go home ever feeling on their own. I believe that somebody with, you know, you lose a limb, you would go home and have support, and many other charities do have mandatory support. I'd really love to see that, so that it still relies just now on families having to look for the support. They might get given information, but I'd really like to think that we get to a point one day where, I mean, bereavement care is always improving. You know, we hear that all the time. If we look back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I mean, it changes all the time, and for the good. I still think we've got a long way to go. I think there's, you know, for me, it's the understanding, I think, of the trauma that's involved in losing a baby, that complexity. It's why we offer our counselling, and it's why we offer long-term counselling, because, you know, through lots of research and knowing families for a long time, we understand how that can impact. And I think my vision remains the same, as one of we will fit around the families. Grief is different for everybody, and so therefore the bereavement care should be different to accommodate their needs at any point in their journey. So we might do a light touch at the beginning, and we could hear from them not until maybe 6 months or a year later. It might be we support them weekly. It may be that they go on to have counselling because their grief feels a bit more stuck or complex. But as a charity, we reverse. So we don't have a system and they fit into, we reverse our model inside out and we build around them. There is no such thing as this is how we do it. It's we will grow and evolve with the families. And the most important thing is that they know at any point that they're not on their own.
Absolutely. And I think that is absolutely at the centre of Baby Loss Awareness Week, which is all around reducing isolation. It's something that we know and we hear from families all the time about, that earth-shattering news when they hear the news that their baby has died, overwhelming isolation and loneliness. But here we are today, 2020, in the midst of a pandemic, and we know from the families we support the increase and severity of the isolation through lockdown and the increased restrictions, partners not being able to support in the way that they would, families not being able to give the support that they need. So today is Baby Loss Awareness Week. It's the first day. It runs from the 9th to the 15th of October. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the history of that and our involvement with it and why it's such an important week.
Yeah, so the history of Baby Loss Awareness Week, I think, is an opportunity to have the bereaved parents' voices heard. So, many other causes will have a month of the year where it's about that, and I think it raises that profile and voice. It's a subject nobody really wants to speak about. I mean, nobody wants to speak about death. I mean, goodness me, in COVID time, so many families are experiencing death, and yet we still know that it's the most difficult topic. I do believe that we're a death-denying country, but you bring in the baby dying, and I mean that's a different level all again, because that's not something somebody can relate to easily. But it's more so important, and that's why we do have Baby Loss Awareness Week. So we're part of an alliance where there's many charities involved, and collectively it's about that voice all gathering together and making sure that families feel that they can join in. Social media is incredibly crowded at the moment, but it's a time to break that life is okay, life is perfect for everybody, because we know that it's very definitely not. And it is a time to say, I'm here. My baby was part of my life, is part of my life. He or she counted. My son and daughter is, somebody I'm proud of and love, and they can say their name. And most importantly, I think we're going to be sharing stories and this podcast along with other family stories over the week through film and on social media, and reaching out and saying, we're here, we remember with you. And of course, as you've just touched on, that accumulates with Wave of Light on the 15th, sorry, which is a lovely opportunity for people to light a candle at 7 o'clock together, and it feels like there's a unity around that.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nicola. We're so grateful for your time and for sharing about your wonderful son, Theo. I'm sure that hearing his story will have touched a lot of people listening today. So I have just one more question for you today, something that we ask all our guests on our podcast, and that is, can you share something that you're grateful for? It might be today, or it might just be in general, but if you could share that with us.
Can I do two things?
Of course.
So I'm grateful for my son. I'm grateful for all my boys, but I am grateful every day that Theo chose me as his mum. I can't think of anything I'm more grateful for. He has taught me so much, and I live with him. He's me and I am him, and I wouldn't be doing this today, I wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for him, and so he has to have the most gratitude. The next thing I'm grateful for is anybody along the way who helps me on my journey. My team that I work with, I'm grateful every day for having such a compassionate and flexible team. I can hear my dog in the background. And I'm also really grateful for all the professionals and everybody else who tries to get the charity to where we want to go and believes in what we're doing and believes in our vision. So that's a great question. Thanks for that.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that with us as well. And thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Nicola. I hope you found that useful and the areas we explored were meaningful and helpful to you. I also hope that Nicola's story has helped you feel more connected. And if you are a bereaved parent listening, please know that you do not have to face this alone. As always, please reach out or follow us on our website, heldinourhearts.org.uk, or you can email us on info@heldinourhearts.org.uk if you need support. You can also find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter with the handle of Held in Our Hearts, and on Facebook, Baby Loss Counselling and Support. Please remember also this week is Baby Loss Awareness Week, so support us by getting involved and sharing on the hashtag BLAW2020. We have a special Wave of Light event at 7 p.m. on the 15th of October if you want to join us. Details are on our Facebook page, and we also have personalised images that we can make for you. Again, details on our Facebook page. Thank you so much, and we hope you'll join us next time.